14-team Superflex mock draft. Let's get into it. So we're going to be doing half PPR scoring, 14 teams, 2 wide receiver, 2 flex for this one. Open up the rosters a little bit. Let's go ahead and randomize the draft order. And I got pick 2. So first pick off the board, no surprise there. It was Josh Allen. I will say in 14-team league, obviously the quarterbacks run out very quickly. So definitely want to make sure you lock in your top guy, whether that be Allen, Jackson, or Daniels. In 10-team league or in 8-team leagues, maybe that's when you want to look toward Jamar Chase. But for the purpose of this format, I will go ahead and lock in who my number 2 quarterback is in Lamar Jackson. So I know that was kind of cheating a little bit, taking the second pick, but hey, it was randomized. Before I get into the next pick, I know we haven't done any 14-team specific Superflex mocks. So if you guys are in a 14-team league, if you don't mind just leaving a comment down below, not just because we're like trying to drive engagement or things like that, but as we prepare for next off season, if there is a big audience for that, we will definitely spend more time doing so. Okay, so off the board, there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 different quarterbacks gone. That's probably to be expected. And at the wide receiver position, we see 10 wide receivers go. So that is a little bit of a tough pill to swallow. So I know it kind of seemed like out the gate, having the 2 pick and being able to lock down Lamar was a big advantage. But I'm firmly in the camp that you want to leave no draft without a top 8 wide receiver. That probably didn't really make sense grammatically. And you definitely don't want to leave the draft without a top 10 or 11 wide receiver. Now, there was a hard line for me at 11 after Lad McConkey, but that was before Keenan Allen re-signed with the team. That was before Rashawn Slater went down. So I think that line is being blurred just a little bit. So he's definitely someone I would be considering here. Now at the running back position, I do have Christian McCaffrey as my number 4 running back. So that's an interesting direction I can go in. So let's go ahead and take a look at the cheat sheet here. So the quarterback position, Purdy, Herbert, Goff, May, Caleb, Jordan Love. So I'm comfortable with all of those guys. So I'll probably wait until round 3 to lock in my second. Now, if you're saying, wow, 2 quarterbacks that early is a little bit too rich for my blood. In 14-team league, things change quite a bit. So at the running back position, CMC, Henry, and Genty, I have in the same tier. And then at the wide receiver position, again, I still do have Lad a tier above. However, I'm not as, sold on that necessarily. But I think for the purpose of this, I will go ahead and take Lad McConkey. Now, this is a 2 wide receiver, 2 flex. I typically treat those going into the draft as if they are like a typical 3 wide receiver, 1 flex league, but obviously don't box yourself out and things like that. So let's look down the board here and let's take Lad McConkey. So I know he's been kind of a little bit banged up, so definitely keep an eye on that if you are drafting in the upcoming days. Maybe you want to be a little bit more cautious, but if you're pushing all the way up through the season, you have a little bit more time to see that through. So this presents an interesting conundrum for me because I didn't really necessarily expect Devontae Adams to go off the board. So I do have the pick of the litter of the running backs. So I think what I should do is go in the direction of Christian McCaffrey. But the problem is if there's a huge run at quarterback, I could be completely shut out of the position. So again, quarterback is very deep this year. So let's expand this a little bit, but am I necessarily comfortable with the potential of Cam Ward being my number 2, of Geno Smith being my number 2? I don't know. And if that does happen in Superflex, you can be behind the 8 ball very quickly. Like, to give you an example of our home league last year, I waited on quarterback, and I ended up with Geno Smith, and I ended up with Justin Fields, as well as some other kind of depth pieces. I think Bryce Young actually as well. But long story short, I thought I had figured it out in the beginning, right? Like Geno was rolling, and Justin Fields, like obviously he didn't look great, but he was putting up fantasy points. And then as soon as he got benched, my depth was not very good. And it's very hard to make up ground in Superflex if you are not loaded at the quarterback position. So I think maybe what I'll do is I will lean in to a strength here, because a strength of, starting off with Lamar, is, obviously advantageous. Now, I do have Purdy and Goff kind of similarly bucketed, as well as Drake May and Caleb Williams. Now, because I have Lamar, I can go in many different directions. I can shoot for a little bit more upside with Drake May and Caleb Williams, or I can go with the stability of Goff or Purdy. But what I think I'll do is I'm starting to flip Goff and Purdy. I think I will go with Brock Purdy. We've seen how great he's been. We know this offense should be very solid. Obviously, they're dealing with some injuries at the wide receiver position, but we can trust that Shanahan will have it figured out. And if Christian McCaffrey is healthy and Pearsall looks good, obviously we know George Kittle is going to be in for a monster season. So let's go ahead and lock in Purdy. So unfortunately, I didn't see the run at quarterback that I thought I was going to. So obviously Goff went off, Caleb went off, Drake May went off. However, I still would have been happy with Jordan Love here, or even Trevor Lawrence. So maybe looking back, what I should have done is gone with Christian McCaffrey. But that being said, if you are in a 14-team league and you know your league and you're saying, hey, like pretty much all these guys are going to be gone by that point, again, you don't want to be shut out. So I'm a little bit behind the 8 ball at other positions here. And I will say these computers don't always draft super accurately. The reason I did this on Fantasy Pros is because Sleeper doesn't update theirs for 14-team like whatsoever. They still draft quarterbacks as if it's like a 10-team league, and it'll be like round 20 and like Trevor Lawrence is like still on the board. It's a little bit ridiculous. So I thought this would be a little bit more accurate, but let's challenge ourselves and let's see how good of a team we can build going forward. Now, because it is 2 wide receiver, 2 flex, I can look at James Cook, who I really like, Kenneth Walker, I really like, Omanor and Hampton, who I really like. And then at the wide receiver position, DK, Cortland Sutton, Devontae Smith. So I guess this decision that I have to make here is, do I want to lock in my second wide receiver and choosing between DK, Sutton, Devontae, or do I want to lock in running back? And I think because I see quite a bit of sameness with a lot of these wide receivers, we'll kind of dive into more of them with probably the next pick, but I will go with who is my highest ranked running back. Still, at this point, I haven't pushed Hampton over James Cook, and the fact that McConkey's already on this team, I don't want to necessarily go double Chargers. So James Cook, obviously it was great to see him get his contract, very well deserved. Next 2 picks, Cortland Sutton and Chuba Hubbard. So I can go with Walker or Hampton, but I think this is probably a point where I want to go in the direction of a wide receiver. Now with DK, Devontae Smith, Tet, I have all those guys pretty similarly ranked. Zay Flowers, I have quite a bit lower. Calvin Ridley, kind of climbing up my boards, but not quite in that low 20s range. So I could go in a couple different directions. So DK interests me, obviously, because he's kind of that only game in town. Devontae Smith, just year-over-year consistency. JMO, very boom bust. And Tet, the exciting young prospect. So I guess I would be curious what you guys would do in this scenario. If we're going strictly off my rankings, I actually do have Devontae Smith the highest, which I know that's probably not consensus, but he was the wide receiver 17 in points per game last year. And they obviously didn't have to throw the ball a ton. We've seen him be great seasons. And more importantly, he's just a fantastic player. So I think what I'll do is just, oh man, that's tricky. Shoot. This is actually harder than I thought. I know I kind of gave that spiel, but I kind of want to go with Ken Walker here. And again, I know I talked about wanting to start 3 to 4 wide receivers in this build, but I can start technically 4 running backs in a 2 flex build. So let's go with Walker. We'll see how this turns out. These deep leagues are a little bit crazy. When you start 2 quarterbacks up at the top, things get a little bit dicey. So looking at this board, I know that Calvin Ridley, Travis Hunter, Chris Olave are guys that I'm going to be targeting. I know Olave, he kind of falls quite a bit, so I can probably, I might even be able to get him in 2 rounds later. Ridley definitely flying out my boards, but I think with this, it's just too hard to pass on Travis Hunter. Like, this kid's a generational talent. They bring in Liam Cohen. Hopefully we see Trevor Lawrence improve. This is kind of a put up or shut up year for T-Law. And this is a guy that is just an absolutely electric playmaker. I'm sure you guys have been following him throughout his time in college and have just been enamored with what he can do on a football field. We have the head coach come out and say a couple weeks ago, hey, we want him on the field for 80% of the snaps on offense. So even if that doesn't hold true when he's out there, there's going to be a lot of designed looks for him. And obviously Brian Thomas Jr. will deter a lot of that coverage, and this should be a very heavily concentrated offense. So swinging back around, Ridley still available. I think that's a good pick here. Jacoby Myers, I might have Myers actually ranked the highest of the group, so that is kind of an intriguing option. But I think every report that we're getting from camp is just Cam Ward and Calvin Ridley's target percentage and target share and connection is through the roof, right? And I think Ridley, obviously he doesn't have as many miles on him as other wide receivers at his age. Just, he's dealt with injury or with suspension, really. And last year he had a whole ton of unrealized air yards just because Will Levis couldn't get him the ball. So I think, and Trevor has alluded to this many times, we could be looking at Calvin Ridley as kind of this year's Terry McLaurin, where he gets, this big upgrade at quarterback. He's kind of been, not great necessarily for fantasy, but obviously in recent years, but obviously is a fantastic player. So let's go with Ridley here. So one thing to call out here too is with this run at quarterbacks like Tua, Bryce Young, JJ McCarthy, Sam Darnold, Cam Ward, Geno Smith, we would probably see that a little bit earlier in your standard drafts, your home leagues, given that this is 14-team league, but no system is necessarily perfect. So we're kind of just working with what we got. So I have 2 running backs and 3 wide receivers. So just 1 position player short of a full roster. So let's go ahead and pull up the cheat sheet. I can go in the direction, or I can go in a few different directions here. I don't think I'm necessarily interested in Andrews or Kelsey at this point. I do have Njoku as my tight end 6. So that could be a thought if there is a lot of value, and just kind of hope that team 1 doesn't take him. But let's look at who's available here at the running back position. I wish they would just show this. Jaylen Warren, no. Obviously, we haven't been getting necessarily the best reports about Caleb Johnson in camp, but I'm still a Caleb Johnson believer. Maybe we can target him later in this draft. Javonte, Zach Charbonnet, none of these guys really interest me whatsoever. Stefon Diggs, Jordan Addison, interesting. Obviously, I like him as a player, but if you're not going to be able to use him those first 3 weeks, that's a little bit of a tough pill to swallow when I'm still looking to fill out my starting roster. So what I think I will do is I will just take Stefon Diggs. Now, I know kind of in the beginning of the offseason and OTAs, like he was looking sharp and he was cutting, and then we see like a really nice play last week, but he looked like he kind of had a little bit of, I don't want to say like a slow giddy up or a hitch in his step, but it didn't look 100% clean. But again, he should really be Drake May's number 1 target. I think the world of Drake May, and assuming he's 95 or 90% of himself, I think could be in for a really nice season. So let's go with Diggs here. And then I mentioned before at the, there goes Addison, at the running back position, there wasn't really anyone that interests me. So I talked about this previously, where my goal is to start 4 wide receivers and 2 running backs. So I'm obviously very set on those 2 running backs. So a few ways I can go. I could kind of protect the investment and take Zach Charbonnet. However, it feels so early to be taking a handcuff, but Charbonnet is really the only handcuff where it really makes sense, because we know, he can step in and fill that role. But if Ken Walker's rolling through week 6 and, roster spots are getting a little bit tight, it's like, I don't want to cut Charbonnet. So I think my mindset with it is take him if you can. And if you have deep benches, now this is only a 4-bench league. So, I don't necessarily have the room, but that's why you have Fab as well. I mean, if Ken Walker does go down, you can definitely blow your budget on it. So that's my kind of spiel on that. Now, looking at some of these wide receivers, no one that really interests me. I do wish Jacoby Myers had made it back. That would have been a nice thing. So I think what I'll do, I talked about him before, is just take my tight end 6, David Njoku. A lot of this kind of just depends on how many games that we're going to get started from Joe Flacco. So if it's Flacco all 17, I think Njoku really has a top 5 ceiling. And I think we're going to look at tight end rankings week 1, and he's going to be playing the Cincinnati Bengals, and he's going to be ranked tight end 4, maybe tight end 5. So I really like his value this year, and that really kicked off a huge run at tight end. So I am very glad I pulled the trigger on that, and there's some good value. So now we're kind of at the point of the draft where obviously 3rd quarterbacks would be going as well. But I know a lot of you play in leagues. I've gotten some comments on this too, that only allow 2 quarterbacks on the roster. So I think what we'll do is just kind of assume that to be the case, because the computer's not selecting 3rd quarterbacks anyway. So I don't want to kind of goof it up and say, hey, you can still get XYZ player and, super deep and into the draft. You get where I'm going here. So let's pull up the cheat sheets here, take a look at some of the position players. Let's look at the running backs. Rashad White, he's banged up. But he should have a role once he comes back, albeit not necessarily a big one. And at the wide receiver position, Darnell Mooney, I wish he wasn't banged up right now because he's such a good late round target of mine. So I think what I will do is go in the direction of Mooney because I'm not necessarily being scared off of Mooney. Obviously, the coaches' comments about him were like, "Oh, he can be back soon," or like some point this season. You're like, okay. Hopefully give me something more concrete than that. But I'm not going to have to start him anyway at this point. So I can be patient with that. Maybe if he does miss games, I can throw him on the IR spot, which gives me a little bit more roster flexibility. But Mooney's definitely a late round target that should be on your radar. Now, swinging back around, I definitely should go in on another running back. And somebody who's staring me right in the face is Austin Ekeler. So I'm recording this Sunday evening, and we're getting reports that Brian Robinson is on the trade block. Now, will something happen? Maybe, maybe not. Do I think Brian Robinson is a world beater? No, not necessarily. I think he has a really cool story, and he's a solid player and he's a touchdown scorer. But if he does get traded, that opens up a lot of runway for Austin Ekeler. And I know Ja'Cory Cross-Merritt is like the darling of the offseason, and what a great story. Like he's awesome. And I think if Robinson is gone, he should be on your radar too. But it's no doubt that Ekeler is going to get some serious playing time on a good offense. So when this releases Monday morning, and a trade does or doesn't happen, or that's squashed, you can maybe kind of throw this out the window. But even so, I think Ekeler might have some standalone value this year. Okay, so 2 picks left. I probably want to leave with one more running back and one more wide receiver. At the running back position, so Roschon, I don't know. I'm not a Roschon fan. Like, I don't think I've taken him in any best ball drafts. I've just been taking Kyle Monangai and just kind of hoping that rookie develops. I don't know. I thought he was a decent prospect. So there's a bunch of handcuffs, kind of late round flyers. Kyle Monangai, who I just mentioned, he might be an interesting one. Woody Marks is someone who is still buried here. So I think he's definitely going to be, or should be, a target of yours late because we don't really know what the Joe Mixon situation is going to be. So I think, I'm sure a lot of you guys watched Woody Marks at USC and thought he was a good player. And his calling card is his ability to catch passes. And if this offensive line isn't great and this new OC brings in a better scheme, I think he can have a lot of value. And I think he was even going to have like a little bit, maybe not like fantasy value with Mixon there, but I think he would have gotten mixed in a little bit. So let's go ahead and take him here. Okay, so last pick, let's have a little bit of fun with this. Now, Kyle Williams is someone who I think will have some value as the season goes on. I'm just worried kind of in the beginning that he's not necessarily getting on the field much. We know Diggs is there. We know Pop Douglas is going to be on the field. And we're getting some good reports on Kayshon Boutte. And Kayshon Boutte is someone like I liked kind of like irrationally too much last year. And I was drafting him a ton in pre-draft best ball before they took Kyle Williams. So I'm kind of just like pumping the brakes a little bit. But Boutte is a good player. I'm sure a lot of you guys remember him from LSU. Legette's an interesting one just because he'll kind of play his more natural position now that they have Ted McMillan. You can kind of say the same thing about Adam Thielen. He has the potential to kind of get off to a hot start, but I think Ted is just going to start as the alpha. Look at all these Carolina guys. That's interesting. Darius Slayton's an interesting one because Darius Slayton, I think you're going to see Darius Slayton on a lot of waiver wire videos because what does Russ do well? He throws the deep ball. And what does Darius Slayton do well? He catches the deep ball. And, Neighbors is obviously going to be the number one, but he hasn't really been practicing either. And he's kind of banged up a little bit. So even if Slayton doesn't get drafted in your leagues, he's probably someone that should be on your radar. So let's go ahead and take him here. Wow, I got an A-. Okay, that's pretty good. I feel like this offseason I've been kind of anywhere from like the A- to B+ range. I've given the spiel before, but I haven't done a Fantasy Pros one in a while. I think that's kind of a good range, the B+ to A-, because you don't want to go like too much by their computer consensus. But like ESPN, for example, if you leave your ESPN draft with like a D or a D+ or a D-, you've done really well. Because for whatever reason, they are just horrible at ranking teams. I'm sure you guys have seen that before. And if you are still playing in an ESPN leagues, please convince. Never mind. So looking over this team, I've got Lamar and Brock Purdy, just two absolute studs that in 14 teams Superflex is awesome. I've got 2 studs at the running back position and then at wide receiver, Lad McConkey, Travis Hunter, filled in with my flex of Calvin Ridley and Stefon Diggs. On the bench, I've got the upside play of Darnell Mooney with Mr. Solid, I guess not that flashy Darius Slayton. Woody Marks, the rookie who might get a ton of runway, and then Austin Ekeler, the seasoned vet, who, if the Brian Robinson trade rumors do come true, is going to have a ton of value. So if you are drafting in the short term, I think it might be worth taking Ekeler with a late round pick. And with that, thank you guys so much for watching. I mentioned if you do play 14-team Superflex, please do comment down below because we will do more of these next offseason. I know draft season is coming up, so good luck and see you in the next one.